All right, hope you guys are doing well. We're going to move on today. We're going to talk about more with the press, okay, and trials, and maybe how this is going to be confrontational with the government and how they try to censor information to the American public. So, real quick, what is prior restraint? Described near versus Minnesota, 1931 court case. There you go. I'll give you a couple seconds. You can write that down, and we'll go over it. All right, so prior restraint is the censorship of information before it's published is a common way of government to control information and limit freedom of speech. All right, so with prior restraint, that is a way for the government to try to, in some ways, get involved before some information might be given to the American public, which might cause, let's say, an uproar or violence, or this might be sensitive information that the government is not ready to, I guess, relieved to the American public. Okay, and in many cases, this is a way to again to try to stop any type of strong uprising or rebellion to happen. So in near versus Minnesota, there was a law established in Minnesota, and this was to try to prevent the press from publicizing and really labeling public officials as, let's say, gangsters, or I think they say grafters, so people that would almost be very corrupt in society. So many of these public officials thought it was a good idea to try to limit the press from publishing these types of words about them, stories about them. And in many ways, this was almost taking the freedom of speech away from the press. And the press is only there to inform the American public, American people of what's going on in our country and our government. And obviously, it needs to be backed, right? It needs to be some sort of evidence behind this. Okay, it can't be any type of libel or any type of slander spoken about these public officials. It has to be proof, right? And in many cases, this is why our country has media to keep the people informed, in line. And again, it has to be true. It has to be informed. It has to be evidence behind it. If not, then let's face it, the government can kind of persuade the masses to whatever the way they want, right? And in many cases, people argue that today, which, I mean, I'm not getting into that conversation, that argument there, but the press is only there to inform the American public and the people in a way to try to keep the government in line and in check, okay? We can't have a corrupt government where propaganda is used to try to promote the masses in a certain direction or to influence the people in a certain way. The press is there to try to mediate that and to try to, well, mitigate that and to try to, like I said, keep government in check. And for near versus Minnesota, this was a huge court case that which really for allowed for this this newspaper to publish what they like, as long as there's evidence behind it, right? It's almost to a way where these government officials put out this law in Minnesota before 1930s to try to protect themselves, and again, that's not right. Okay, the people need to know what's going on in government, what's going on with policy making, and with these public officials that the people trusted their representation with, right? And that's what near versus Minnesota is all about. All right, moving on here today. So I will attach vocab terms. I know we went through about half of them, and I'd like you to get those done for Friday. Okay. I'm thinking maybe a quiz for Friday. I'll keep you posted, but I want you guys to try to get those vocab terms done. I will post the remainder of the terms up so that you have them. You're good to go with them, things like that. So, all right, moving on here. Where are we at? There we go. Okay. So we talked about prior restraint, censorship of information before it's published, okay, and how this was a way with near versus Minnesota to go against this prior restraint to make sure that that the government officials aren't just protecting themselves from things that they have done or things that happened over time, and that they're trying to hide from the American people. And in many cases, that isn't right, right? Okay, and we need to try to make sure that we are focused on mediating the government, mitigating any type of thing that they're trying to let's say, hide from the American people. But prior restraint in some cases is right? It's appropriate, especially during wartime. And like, let's say with the Manhattan Project, if we would have gave that information out to the American people, who knows? That information could have gotten to, Germany, Japan, whatever it might be, and they would have known we were trying to create an atomic bomb, things like that, to try to end World War II. Right. So in many cases, it's appropriate, and in other cases, we can't allow government to hide things from the American people and almost take away our freedom of speech and keep the government in line with our media. All right, so New York Times versus United States, 1971. This reaffirmed prior restraint doctrine established in Near versus Minnesota. So this was, they call it the Pentagon Papers. This is a really important court case, something that went along the lines and really really kept the government in check, especially during the Vietnam War. So these Pentagon Papers, there was a person working for the Pentagon during the time of the Vietnam War that released this information. This was things like documents. This is some secret plans and memos, let's say, from the Vietnam War that was leaked to the New York Times. And the New York Times published this information, and the government stepped in. They said, listen, you can't just take this information and present it to the American public, because these are things that are documents and information that we had to try to make sure that is protected, because this could cause a huge uproar, a huge rebellion, or a huge violent protest in America. Because during that time of Vietnam War, let's face it, there's a lot of controversy around it. Many people thought we shouldn't be involved. A lot of the things that we're doing with napalm bombing was unethical. And this was something that was a huge topic of a debate for many, many, many Americans during that time. And it was a huge conflict. And with these Pentagon Papers and now the plans that were created by the American government during this time of war, now it's being leaked to the American public before their consent. And the government thought this was prior restraint, that the American people shouldn't know about these certain types of memos and documents and plans that were developed during this time. And again, this was a huge court case, and actually sided with the press on this. Okay, they said you can't be really hiding things from the American public, that the American media has the ability to try to keep government in line and keeping them in check and let them know what's going on in this time of crisis. And this has really never been happened. This never happened before. World War II, World War I, during these times of war, the government pretty much had full swing and control of what could be said and what could be published and what could be presented to the American public. But now with the Vietnam War, this was a totally different atmosphere, a change, a difference maker. And this court case especially kind of kept the government in check of what they could actually hide from the American public, what they could actually make sure that is not presented to the people about this particular sensitive topic. All right, real quick, to make sure that you see if you're watching this video, I want you to answer this question. You can type it up on a Word doc, a Google Doc, and just submit it, turn it in to this assignment. Okay, this is one of those hidden questions to see if everybody's watching. I want you to answer this. In what kinds of situations do you think it might be reasonable to consider censoring information or opinions? Okay. So what kinds of situations do you think it might be reasonable to consider censoring information or opinions? All right, I might attach it to the announcement too, to make sure that everybody is getting the work done here as well. But I wanted to try to keep that in, make sure everybody's watching the video there. So there you go. Answer that question and just submit it so I know that you're watching the video, and that obviously I can give you points for it. All right, next one, real quick. Fair trials and free press. So in Shepperard versus Maxwell, this is an important court case too, in the 1960s, mid-1960s. And actually, Shepperard was charged of killing his wife. Of all things, do you believe it? And many people actually think he did it. But because this was a alarming court case for the community, that this is really something that's never been seen before in their community, a murder, a homicide, things like that. The press was all into the courtroom. It was to a point where there was pictures being taken, almost videos being broadcast live on television, and it was really hard to communicate, speak during the time of this court case. And obviously, the press got involved a little bit too much. And this came to a point where Shepard was like, "Listen, we need to try to do something here, and we need to say that this is kind of going against his character. All right, this is damaging his character. No one knows about the court case really, other than that he's being maybe convicted of killing his wife, and it came to a point it infringed on the Sixth Amendment, free and fair trial." That the press got too involved with this court case to a point where this was damaging his character, that this was causing an interruption in the court hearing and the case. And this came out that he was set free, that he was dropped of all charges because this was an interruption of a free and fair trial. And I think that's really interesting that this was, because who knows, maybe he actually did kill his wife. And it's not something to laugh about, but here he is kind of getting away with it because the press was too involved with this court case. And going along with the Sixth Amendment, he should have a fair and free trial, that the press shouldn't get involved and there shouldn't be interruptions between the court case and almost defamatory speech against him. Obviously, he would have to live with that the rest of his life. Did he kill his wife? Did he, that burden, that conscious thought being in his head for the rest of his life? But he is actually dropped of all charges because this free and fair trial, right? The Sixth Amendment. And then finally here, a requester is kept isolated until the trial ends. So this is set that this information won't be reported or released to the press, to the public, until after the court case. That this is something that is sequestered, right? That this information is going to be released to the American public after the court case to try to relieve any interruptions, try to stop any interruptions from happening in the court case, which might sway a certain decision. And then finally, a gag order is an order by a judge barring the press from publishing certain types of information about a pending court case. So they can report what's going on, what's happening, but they can't give out, I guess you could say, updates about it. They can't tell you what the jury's kind of swaying towards, what kind of evidence is given towards that. It only can occur after the court case already happened. So if it's pending, if it actually is in progress, okay, then that information cannot be leaked until, or given out until after the court case. And there's only certain types of information they actually can give out, because this might cause a lot of interruptions to the court. This might cause a lot of people kind of charging in on the courtroom, especially during a homicide or a murder. And let's face it, it could result into many people trying to, let's say, assassinate that person, depending on the types of crimes that person may have committed. In Shepard's case, right? That might have been it. All right, there we go. Hope you guys are doing well. Again, please submit that question there for you. I will put it up on a Word document so everybody kind of knows where we're at. But again, watch the videos. Take care. Have a good one.